In a recent video, I spoke of Dungeons and Dragons in terms of quality and not quantity. But more to that, I also spoke of the quality of the company behind the brand. And I also spoke of the doom and gloom that some insist is happening within the D&D brand itself. GameMasters here, and I've got to be very clear about the intent of this specific video and what this book is. The first thing I need to be very clear about is, and I've said this in the past past videos, I am not a Wizards of the Coast employee. I'm not a Hasbro employee. The second thing I must make very clear on the intent of this video is that my intent is to examine this book and to provide to you clear commentary on its message, as well as providing a very clear critique comparing the landscape from what the time period that this came from to where we currently are today, the latter part of 2023. Thirdly, I need to make it clear that I am in no way attempting to break or circumvent any copyright. I will not be reproducing this book to sell, and under the guidelines of fair use, I will only be showing 10% of what is found inside of this 36-page book. I'm also allowed up to 500 words to quote from the book. And that's not to diminish the remaining 90% of what is in here, or the words that I won't be quoting. Again, I am being very cautious as to not break any copyright. I appreciate you bearing with me while I got that disclaimer out of the way. Lastly, upon official request of Wizards of the Coast, should they request it, I will take down this video. As an overview, this book is made up of 5 parts or chapters. In the description, I placed a link to Wizards' website that shows those chapters and a brief blurb of what each one covers. That link also contains some of the artwork that can be found within these pages. This is only 36 pages in length, and it does not go into employee benefits or policies. You won't find anything in here about how to obtain parking permits or how to request vacation days. There's nothing in here that addresses company policy, nor does it contain any insider trade secrets, clocking in requirements, or any other company logistics. The first section I want to discuss and critique goes into Wizards' overall philosophy, but also specifies that their mission is to inspire a lifetime love for games. As we move through this, I want you to keep that element in mind. An inspiration of a lifetime love for games. I also need to say that as best I can tell, this book came out in the latter part of 2019 or early part of 2020 as this timeline depicts. So this was all produced under the beginning stages of COVID-19, which is why I suspect that they moved the core of this onto their website as opposed to having a hard, tangible book. To critique that message, I'm not dead yet, so if Wizards inspires me to love games until my lifetime meets its ends, well, that remains to be seen. But I can say that I do love games, and while Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering have certainly been a part of that love over the years, it's not the sole attraction. Under the chapter Be Legendary, we are provided with a blurb that details out how they are building a legacy, and they admit that the path to success is understanding how they can improve, and that they will keep their eyes and ears open for ways to level up their properties. Now, give a touch of criticism here, and I'm looking at this under the lens of what we have seen this past year, stemming from the OGL issue up through all the other issues that we've seen. Knowing that in last year's 2022 shareholder meeting, where we found out that the board felt that Dungeons and Dragons was being under-monetized, and seeing the sheer amount of product that has come out this year alone, including the entirety of Magic the Gathering, they have certainly been leveling up the amount of their properties. While I don't have solid sales numbers for any specific D&D book or Magic set released, it would be pure speculation as to if they leveled any of it up in terms of surpassing that quoted under-monetized view. But in this past month's shareholder meeting, we were told that both Magic and D&D grew by 40%. And they have listened to us, the customer, when we have been vocal about issues. And that, in turn, does translate to their ears being open, at least. The next area I want to critique is found in the Delve into Dungeons section. It is the second paragraph that I want to examine. Dungeons are dangerous and packed with all kinds of monsters and threats. Now, this is a heavy metaphor, meaning that the corporate world is packed full of hurdles and complications that can slow down the gears. You don't get to the other side by charging in. You get there by paying attention to your surroundings, listening to others for advice, and using creativity to find clever solutions. Yes, this is exactly what they did with the OGL. They attempted to have a private summit meeting to shoehorn in something that was ultimately set out to benefit them. They charged in. They 100% failed at paying attention to their surroundings. They completely ignored the landscape, and in turn, it bit them in the butt. But then they listened. They really were not given a choice, as there were a good vocal lot of creators that stood up against this gaming giant with their voice, and that caused Wizards of the Coast to halt what they were doing and listen. Following through with other issues that popped up over this past year, they listened to us. They corrected those issues as best they could. Again, keep in mind, this is a comparison as to where they were versus where we are now. Consider this. Hasbro bought WotC, Wizard of the Coast, in 1999. This book was distributed to employees in or towards the end of 2019. For nearly 20 years, the issues that cropped up during that time frame were fairly small compared to each of the ones that popped up in 2023 alone. That's the biggest main question that I have. What in the hell happened in that 1 year that was not going on in the previous 20? It's not like one of the execs woke up one morning in November or December of 2022 and thought, I think we really need to fuck up the landscape in the coming year. I just don't buy it that they purposely set out to be this evil entity hell-bent on trying to offend anyone with the Hadozee, or that they wanted to royally screw up the shipping timeline by purposely producing uneven cards for the Book of Many Things. I think what did happen, and that is that some mistakes have been there all along, but the OGL taught us to watch over every release like a hawk, that we, the players, purposely sought out any mistake to hold over them. Which brings us to the section called It Takes a Multiverse. It starts out, it is a privilege to have the fan base we do. And again, keep in mind, this is all from 1999. They aren't just players, but content creators, artists, performers, collectors, writers, and makers. We owe our success, past and future, to them. And they did, and they still do. I believe that Wizard of the Coast understands without a doubt that the tabletop role player does not intrinsically need them. We have a variety of other games out there to play. We have access to a myriad of different role-playing systems, and honestly, at the end of the day, they know that all we need is our imagination, that we don't need their books, but they also know that we are what keeps them in business because we want their books. How well does that line, we owe our success, past and future, to them, translate to today, especially after this last year we've witnessed? Does WotC still recognize that statement? Do they still feel that they owe their success, especially their future success, to us? I gotta say, I think they got a big dose of reality when we were vocal. I'll use a metaphor. It's almost like a child that has had a taste of a super yummy homemade cookie and more just came out of the oven. They approach with that big glob of chocolate smeared across their face and snatch one off the cooling rack without realizing it was still hot. They didn't even fathom what hot was. They just grabbed at it and got burned. They tried to make a success off of our wallets out of greed, and we caught them, and they got burned. But then we have this last paragraph. We have a duty to listen to their feedback, research and test what works best, and always try to do better for our fans. And howdy did we give them feedback for them to listen to. But again, how well does that translate to today's landscape? Here's how I see it. They, Wizards, has done some things through the lens of total page-for-page, word-for-word scrutiny by us, the fans, and we have been watching for them to goof up. But with each misstep, they have publicly corrected it. They have fixed the issues. I went into detail in a video of each of the major issues that did pop up this past year and exactly what Wizards did to fix it. So I've got to ask, is Wizards of the Coast this evil entity that everyone is making them out to be? Or is the message put forth in their employee handbook still valid? The way I see it, they are listening to us. They are fixing the issues. They are trying to do better by us. As I go into my final few minutes with this, I want to thank my loyal supporters, and I cannot thank them enough. But here's the thing. Yes, Wizards of the Coast is a major company that is doing what it can to generate cash. No, they're not your friend. They're not your buddy. They're not your weekend drinking companion. They do want your money. But I'm not convinced that they are this evil entity living on top of a mountain trying to swoop down and drain you for everything that you've got. After all, it is ultimately our choice as to what to buy or not buy, isn't it? And I think Wizards knows this, so they are making products that they think the mass majority of players will like. You specifically may not like every product that they put out, but they are banking on that a majority of their fan base will. And let's face it, in their most recent shareholder report, we were told that Magic the Gathering and D&D grew by 40% in revenue. That simply means that some out there did like those products. Now, I know I've had a string of 3 intense videos over the past 3 weeks, and I appreciate everyone that's tuned in, but there have been some issues that I simply wanted to address. I think that the core message found within this employee handbook is being held up. If you disagree and D&D is no longer for you, that's perfectly fine. I'm not here attempting to convince anyone to keep up with it. I'm not here to spread any false narrative. I'm simply looking at the words written and combining them with the issues that Wizards addresses. I'm not trying to speculate. I'm not trying to conjecture. I'm simply looking at what Wizards has done to correct its own issues, and they seem to align with this book's overall mission, that they are trying to do better by us, the players and the fans. If I have horribly misunderstood the intent, talk to me down in the comments. I'm not opposed to hearing someone else's view. If you'd like to see a past video that might put the one that you just watched, this one that we've just been doing, into a bit more perspective, be sure to check out this video next, as it discusses if D&D is doomed or not. Again, chat with me below, and until next our paths cross, may you find that dream parking spot as defined in your employee handbook.